Letters of Jane Austen. 1. Steventon, Thursday, January 16, 1796. 1. Have just received yours and Mary's letter, and I thank you both, though their contents might have been more agreeable. I do not at all expect to see you on Tuesday, since matters have fallen out so unpleasantly. And if you are not able to return till after that day, it will hardly be possible for us to send for you before Saturday. Though for my own part I care so little about the ball that it would be no sacrifice to me to give it up for the sake of seeing you 2 days earlier. We are extremely sorry for poor Eliza's illness. I trust, however, that she has continued to recover since you wrote, and that you will none of you be the worse for your attendance on her. What a good-for-nothing fellow Charles is to bespeak the stockings. I hope he will be too hot all the rest of his life for it. I sent you a letter yesterday to Ibthorp, which I suppose you will not receive at Kintbury. It was not very long or very witty, and therefore if you never receive it, it does not much signify. I wrote principally to tell you that the Coopers were arrived and in good health. The little boy is very like Dr. Cooper, and the little girl is to resemble Jane, they say. Our party to Ashe tomorrow night will consist of Edward Cooper, James, for a ball is nothing without him, Buller, who is now staying with us, and I look forward with great impatience to it, as I rather expect to receive an offer from my friend in the course of the evening. I shall refuse him, however, unless he promises to give away his white coat. I am very much flattered by your commendation of my last letter, for I write only for fame, and without any view to pecuniary emolument. Edward is gone to spend the day with his friend, John Lyford, and does not return till tomorrow. Anna is now here. She came up in her chaise to spend the day with her young cousins, but she does not much take to them or to anything about them, except Caroline's spinning wheel. I am very glad to find from Mary that Mr. and Mrs. Fowle are pleased with you. I hope you will continue to give satisfaction. How impertinent you are to write to me about Tom, as if I had not opportunities of hearing from him myself. The last letter that I received from him was dated on Friday, 8th, and he told me that if the wind should be favorable on Sunday, which it proved to be, they were to sail from Falmouth on that day. By this time, therefore, they are at Barbados, I suppose. The Rivers are still at Manadown, and are to be at Ashe tomorrow. I intended to call on the Miss Biggs yesterday had the weather been tolerable. Caroline, Anna, and I have just been devouring some cold souse, and it would be difficult to say which enjoyed it most. Tell Mary that I make over Mr. Hartley and all his estate to her for her sole use and benefit in future, and not only him, but all my other admirers into the bargain wherever she can find them, even the kiss which C. Powlett wanted to give me, as I mean to confine myself in future to Mr. Tom Lefroy, for whom I don't care sixpence. Assure her also, as a last and indubitable proof of Warren's indifference to me, that he actually drew that gentleman's picture for me, and delivered it to me without a sigh. Friday, at length the day is come on which I am to flirt my last with Tom Lefroy, and when you receive this it will be over. My tears flow as I write at the melancholy idea. W.M. Shute called here yesterday. I wonder what he means by being so civil. There is a report that Tom is going to be married to a Lichfield lass. John Lyford and his sister bring Edward home today, dine with us, and we shall all go together to Ashe. I understand that we are to draw for partners. I shall be extremely impatient to hear from you again, that I may know how Eliza is and when you are to return. With best love, etc., I am affectionately yours. J. Austen. Miss Austen. The Rev. Mr. Fowles, Kintbury, Newbury. Chapter 2. Cork Street, Tuesday morn, August, 1796. My dear Cassandra, here I am once more in this scene of dissipation and vice, and I begin already to find my morals corrupted. We reached Staines yesterday, I do not know when, without suffering so much from the heat as I had hoped to do. We set off again this morning at 7 o'clock, and had a very pleasant drive, as the morning was cloudy and perfectly cool. I came all the way in the chaise from Hertford Bridge. Edward and Frank are both gone out to seek their fortunes. The latter is to return soon and help us seek ours. The former we shall never see again. We are to be at Astley's tonight, which I am glad of. Edward has heard from Henry this morning. He has not been at the races at all, unless his driving Miss Pearson over to Rowling one day can be so called. We shall find him there on Thursday. I hope you are all alive after our melancholy parting yesterday, and that you pursued your intended avocation with success. God bless you. I must leave off, for we are going out. Yours very affectionately, J. Austen, Everybody's Love. Chapter 3. Rowling, Monday, September 5. My dear Cassandra, I shall be extremely anxious to hear the event of your ball, and shall hope to receive so long and minute an account of every particular that I shall be tired of reading it. Let me know how many, besides their 14 selves and Mr. and Mrs. Wright, Michael will contrive to place about their coach, and how many of the gentlemen, musicians, and waiters he will have persuaded to come in their shooting jackets. I hope John Lovett's accident will not prevent his attending the ball, as you will otherwise be obliged to dance with Mr. Tinkton the whole evening. Let me know how J. Harwood deports himself without the Miss Biggs, and which of the Marys will carry the day with my brother James. We were at a ball on Saturday, I assure you. We dined at Goodnestone, and in the evening danced 2 country dances and the Boulangeries. I opened the ball with Edward Bridges, the other couples were Louis Cage and Harriet, Frank and Louisa, Fanny and George. Elizabeth played 1 country dance, Lady Bridges the other, which she made Henry dance with her, and Miss Finch played the Boulangeries. In reading over the last 3 or 4 lines, I am aware of my having expressed myself in so doubtful a manner that if I did not tell you to the contrary, you might imagine it was Lady Bridges who made Henry dance with her at the same time that she was playing, which, if not impossible, must appear a very improbable event to you. But it was Elizabeth who danced. We supped there and walked home at night under the shade of 2 umbrellas. Today the Goodnestone party begins to disperse and spread itself abroad. Mr. and Mrs. Cage and George repair to Hythe. Lady Waltham, Miss Bridges, and Miss Mary Finch to Dover, for the health of the 2 former. I have never seen Marian at all. On Thursday, Mr. and Mrs. Bridges return to Danbury. Miss Harriet Hales accompanies them to London on her way to Dorsetshire. Farmer Claringbold died this morning, and I fancy Edward means to get some of his farm, if he can cheat Sir Brooke enough in the agreement. We have just got some venison from Godmersham, which the 2 Mr. Harveys are to dine on tomorrow, and on Friday or Saturday the Goodnestone people are to finish their scraps. Henry went away on Friday, as he purposed, without fail. You will hear from him soon, I imagine, as he talked of writing to Steventon shortly. Mr. Richard Harvey is going to be married, but as it is a great secret, and only known to half the neighborhood, you must not mention it. The lady's name is Musgrave. I am in great distress. I cannot determine whether I shall give Rich Eyes half a guinea or only 5 shillings when I go away. Counsel me, amiable Miss Austen, and tell me which will be the most. We walked Frank last night to Crixhall Rough, and he appeared much edified. Little Edward was breeched yesterday for good and all, and was whipped into the bargain. Pray remember me to everybody who does not inquire after me. Those who do, remember me without bidding. Give my love to Mary Harrison, and tell her I wish, whenever she is attached to a young man, some respectable Dr. Marchmont may keep them apart for 5 volumes. Chapter 4. Rowling, Thursday, September 15. My dear Cassandra, we have been very gay since I wrote last. Dining at Nackington, returning by moonlight, and everything quite in style, not to mention Mr. Claringbold's funeral, which we saw go by on Sunday. I believe I told you in a former letter that Edward had some idea of taking the name of Claringbold. But that scheme is over, though it would be a very eligible as well as a very pleasant plan. Would anyone advance him money enough to begin on? We rather expected Mr. Mills to have done so on Tuesday, but to our great surprise, nothing was said on the subject, and unless it is in your power to assist your brother with 500 or 600 pounds, he must entirely give up the idea. At Nackington, we met Lady Son's picture over the mantelpiece in the dining room, and the pictures of her 3 children in an anteroom, besides Mr. Scott, Miss Fletcher, Mr. Toke, Mr. J. Toke, and the Archdeacon Lynch. Miss Fletcher and I were very thick, but I am the thinnest of the 2. She wore her purple muslin, which is pretty enough, though it does not become her complexion. There are 2 traits in her character which are pleasing. Namely, she admires Camilla and drinks no cream in her tea. If you should ever see Lucy, you may tell her that I scolded Miss Fletcher for her negligence in writing, as she desired me to do, but without being able to bring her to any proper sense of shame. That Miss Fletcher says, in her defense, that as everybody whom Lucy knew when she was in Canterbury has now left it, she has nothing at all to write to her about. By everybody, I suppose Miss Fletcher means that a new set of officers have arrived there. But this is a note of my own. Mrs. Mills, Mr. John Toke, and in short everybody of any sensibility, inquired in tender strains after you, and I took an opportunity of assuring Mr. J.T. that neither he nor his father need longer keep themselves single for you. We went in our 2 carriages to Nackington. But how we divided I shall leave you to surmise, merely observing that as Elizabeth and I were without either hat or bonnet, it would not have been very convenient for us to go in the chaise. We went by Biffrons, and I contemplated with a melancholy pleasure the abode of him on whom I once fondly doted. We dined today at Goodnestone, to meet my Aunt Fielding from Margate and a Mr. Clayton, her professed admirer. At least, so I imagine. Lady Bridges has received very good accounts of Marian, who is already certainly the better for her bathing. So His Royal Highness Sir Thomas Williams has at length sailed, the papers say on a cruise. But I hope they are gone to Cork, or I shall have written in vain. Give my love to Jane, as she arrived at Steventon yesterday, I dare say. I sent a message to Mr. Digweed from Edward in a letter to Mary Lloyd which she ought to receive today. But as I know that the Harwoods are not very exact as to their letters, I may as well repeat it to you. Mr. Digweed is to be informed that illness has prevented Seward's coming over to look at the repairs intended at the farm, but that he will come as soon as he can. Mr. Digweed may also be informed, if you think proper, that Mr. and Mrs. Mills are to dine here tomorrow, and that Mrs. Joan Knatchbull is to be asked to meet them. Mr. Richard Harvey's match is put off till he has got a better Christian name, of which he has great hopes. Mr. Children's 2 sons are both going to be married, John and George. They are to have one wife between them, a Miss Holwell, who belongs to the Black Hole at Calcutta. I depend on hearing from James very soon. He promised me an account of the ball, and by this time he must have collected his ideas enough after the fatigue of dancing to give me one. Edward and Fly went out yesterday very early in a couple of shooting jackets, and came home like a couple of bad shots, for they killed nothing at all. They are out again today, and are not yet returned. Delightful sport. They are just come home, Edward with his 2 brace, Frank with his 2.5. What amiable young men. Friday, your letter and one from Henry are just come, and the contents of both accord with my scheme more than I had dared expect. In one particular I could wish it otherwise, for Henry is very indifferent indeed. You must not expect us quite so early, however, as Wednesday the 20th. On that day se'nnight, according to our present plan, we may be with you. Frank had never any idea of going away before Monday, the 26th. I shall write to Miss Mason immediately and press her returning with us, which Henry thinks very likely and particularly eligible. Buy Mary Harrison's gown by all means. You shall have mine for ever so much money, though, if I am tolerably rich when I get home, I shall like it very much myself. As to the mode of our traveling to town, I want to go in a stagecoach, but Frank will not let me. As you are likely to have the Williams and Lloyds with you next week, you would hardly find room for us then. If anyone wants anything in town, they must send their commissions to Frank, as I shall merely pass through it. The tallow chandler is Penlington, at the Crown and Beehive, Charles Street, Covent Garden. Miss Austen, Steventon, Overton, Hants. 5. Rowling, Sunday, September 18. My dear Cassandra, this morning has been spent in doubt and deliberation, in forming plans and removing difficulties, for it ushered in the day with an event which I had not intended should take place so soon by a week. Frank has received his appointment on board the Captain John Gore, commanded by the Triton, and will therefore be obliged to be in town on Wednesday. And though I have every disposition in the world to accompany him on that day, I cannot go on the uncertainty of the Pearsons being at home, as I should not have a place to go to in case they were from home. I wrote to Miss P. on Friday, and hoped to receive an answer from her this morning, which would have rendered everything smooth and easy, and would have enabled us to leave this place tomorrow, as Frank, on first receiving his appointment, intended to do. He remains till Wednesday merely to accommodate me. I have written to her again today, and desired her to answer it by return of post. On Tuesday, therefore, I shall positively know whether they can receive me on Wednesday. If they cannot, Edward has been so good as to promise to take me to Greenwich on the Monday following, which was the day before fixed on, if that suits them better. If I have no answer at all on Tuesday, I must suppose Mary is not at home, and must wait till I do hear, as after having invited her to go to Steventon with me, it will not quite do to go home and say no more about it. My father will be so good as to fetch home his prodigal daughter from town, I hope, unless he wishes me to walk the hospitals, enter at the Temple, or mount guard at St. James. It will hardly be in Frank's power to take me home. Nay, it certainly will not. I shall write again as soon as I get to Greenwich. What dreadful hot weather we have! It keeps one in a continual state of inelegance. If Miss Pearson should return with me, pray be careful not to expect too much beauty. I will not pretend to say that on a first view she quite answered the opinion I had formed of her. My mother, I am sure, will be disappointed if she does not take great care. From what I remember of her picture, it is no great resemblance. I am very glad that the idea of returning with Frank occurred to me. For as to Henry's coming into Kent again, the time of its taking place is so very uncertain that I should be waiting for dead men's shoes. I had once determined to go with Frank tomorrow and take my chance, etc. But they dissuaded me from so rash a step, as I really think on consideration it would have been. For if the Pearsons were not at home, I should inevitably fall a sacrifice to the arts of some fat woman who would make me drunk with small beer. Mary is brought to bed of a boy, both doing very well. I shall leave you to guess what Mary I mean. Adieu, with best love to all your agreeable inmates. Don't let the Lloyds go on any account before I return, unless Miss P is of the party. How ill I have written. I begin to hate myself. Yours ever, J. Austen. The Triton is a new 32 frigate just launched at Deptford. Frank is much pleased with the prospect of having Captain Gore under his command. Miss Austen, Steventon, Overton, Hants. Chapter 6. Bull and George, Dartford. Wednesday, October 24, 1798. My dear Cassandra, you have already heard from Daniel, I conclude, in what excellent time we reached and quitted Sittingbourne, and how very well my mother bore her journey thither. I am now able to send you a continuation of the same good account of her. She was very little fatigued on her arrival at this place, has been refreshed by a comfortable dinner, and now seems quite stout. It wanted 5 minutes of 12 when we left Sittingbourne, from whence we had a famous pair of horses, which took us to Rochester in an hour and a quarter. The postboy seemed determined to show my mother that Kentish drivers were not always tedious, and really drove as fast as cacks. Our next stage was not quite so expeditiously performed. The road was heavy, and our horses very indifferent. However, we were in such good time and my mother bore her journey so well, that expedition was of little importance to us. And as it was, we were very little more than 2 hours and a half coming hither, and it was scarcely past 4 when we stopped at the inn. My mother took some of her bitters at Ospringe, and some more at Rochester, and she ate some bread several times. We have got apartments up 2 pair of stairs, as we could not be otherwise accommodated with a sitting room and bed chambers on the same floor which we wished to be. We have 1 double-bedded and 1 single-bedded room. In the former my mother and I are to sleep. I shall leave you to guess who is to occupy the other. We sate down to dinner a little after 5, and had some beefsteaks and a boiled fowl, but no oyster sauce. I should have begun my letter soon after our arrival, but for a little adventure which prevented me. After we had been here a quarter of an hour, it was discovered that my writing and dressing boxes had been by accident put into a chaise which was just packing off as we came in, and were driven away toward Gravesend in their way to the West Indies. No part of my property could have been such a prize before, for in my writing box was all my worldly wealth, 7L, and my dear Harry's deputation. Mr. Notley immediately dispatched a man and horse after the chaise, and in half an hour's time I had the pleasure of being as rich as ever. They were got about 2 or 3 miles off. My day's journey has been pleasanter in every respect than I expected. I have been very little crowded and by no means unhappy. Your watchfulness with regard to the weather on our accounts was very kind and very effectual. We had 1 heavy shower on leaving Sittingbourne, but afterwards the clouds cleared away, and we had a very bright crystal afternoon. My father is now reading the Midnight Bell, which he has got from the library, and mother sitting by the fire. Our route tomorrow is not determined. We have none of us much inclination for London, and if Mr. Notley will give us leave, I think we shall go to Staines through Croydon and Kingston, which will be much pleasanter than any other way, but he is decidedly for Clapham and Battersea. God bless you all. Yours affectionately, J.A. I flatter myself that Iddy Doherty will not forget me at least under a week. Kiss him for me. Miss Austen. Godmersham Park, Faversham. Chapter 7. Steventon, Saturday, October 27. My dear Cassandra, your letter was a most agreeable surprise to me today, and I have taken a long sheet of paper to show my gratitude. We arrived here yesterday between 4 and 5, but I cannot send you quite so triumphant an account of our last day's journey as of the first and second. Soon after I had finished my letter from Staines, my mother began to suffer from the exercise or fatigue of traveling, and she was a good deal indisposed. She had not a very good night at Staines, but bore her journey better than I had expected, and at Basingstoke, where we stopped more than half an hour, received much comfort from a mess of broth and the sight of Mr. Lyford, who recommended her to take 12 drops of laudanum when she went to bed as a composer, which she accordingly did. James called on us just as we were going to tea, and my mother was well enough to talk very cheerfully to him before she went to bed. James seems to have taken to his old trick of coming to Steventon in spite of Mary's reproaches, for he was here before breakfast and is now paying us a second visit. They were to have dined here today, but the weather is too bad. I have had the pleasure of hearing that Martha is with them. James fetched her from Ibthorp on Thursday, and she will stay with them till she removes to Kintbury. We met with no adventures at all in our journey yesterday, except that our trunk had once nearly slipped off, and we were obliged to stop at Hartley to have our wheels greased. Whilst my mother and Mr. Lyford were together, I went to Mrs. Ryder's and bought what I intended to buy, but not in much perfection. There were no narrow braces for children, and scarcely any knotting silk, but Miss Wood, as usual, is going to town very soon, and will lay in a fresh stock. I gave 2s, 3d, a yard for my flannel, and I fancy it is not very good, but it is so disgraceful and contemptible an article in itself, that its being comparatively good or bad is of little importance. I bought some Japan ink likewise, and next week shall begin my operations on my hat, on which you know my principal hopes of happiness depend. I am very grand indeed. I had the dignity of dropping out my mother's laudanum last night. I carry about the keys of the wine and closet, and twice since I began this letter have had orders to give in the kitchen. Our dinner was very good yesterday, and the chicken boiled perfectly tender. Therefore I shall not be obliged to dismiss Nanny on that account. Almost everything was unpacked and put away last night. Nanny chose to do it, and I was not sorry to be busy. I have unpacked the gloves and placed yours in your drawer. Their color is light and pretty, and I believe exactly what we fixed on. Your letter was chaperoned here by one from Mrs. Cook, in which she says that Battleridge is not to come out before January, and she is so little satisfied with Cawthorne's dilatoriness that she never means to employ him again. Mrs. Hall of Sherborne was brought to bed yesterday of a dead child, some weeks before she expected, owing to a fright. I suppose she happened unawares to look at her husband. There has been a great deal of rain here for this last fortnight, much more than in Kent, and indeed we found the roads all the way from Staines most disgracefully dirty. Steventon Lane has its full share of it, and I don't know when I shall be able to get to Dean. I hear that Martha is in better looks and spirits than she has enjoyed for a long time, and I flatter myself she will now be able to jest openly about Mr. W. The spectacles which Molly found are my mother's, the scissors my father's. We are very glad to hear such a good account of your patients, little and great. My dear Eddie Doherty's remembrance of me is very pleasing to me, foolishly pleasing, because I know it will be over so soon. My attachment to him will be more durable. I shall think with tenderness and delight on his beautiful and smiling countenance and interesting manner, until a few years have turned him into an ungovernable, ungracious fellow. The books from Winton are all unpacked and put away. The binding has compressed them most conveniently, and there is now very good room in the bookcase for all that we wish to have there. I believe the servants were very glad to see us. Nanny was, I am sure. She confesses that it was very dull, and yet she had her child with her till last Sunday. I understand that there are some grapes left, but I believe not many. They must be gathered as soon as possible, or this rain will entirely rot them. I am quite angry with myself for not writing closer. Why is my alphabet so much more sprawly than yours? Dame Tilbury's daughter has lain in. Shall I give her any of your baby clothes? The laceman was here only a few days ago. How unfortunate for both of us that he came so soon. Dame Bushell washes for us only 1 week more, as Suki has got a place. John Stephen's wife undertakes our purification. She does not look as if anything she touched would ever be clean, but who knows? We do not seem likely to have any other maidservant at present, but Dame Staples will supply the place of one. Mary has hired a young girl from Ash who has never been out to service to be her scrub, but James fears her not being strong enough for the place. Earl Harwood has been to Dean lately, as I think Mary wrote us word, and his family then told him that they would receive his wife if she continued to behave well for another year. He was very grateful, as well he might. Their behavior throughout the whole affair has been particularly kind. Earl and his wife live in the most private manner imaginable at Portsmouth, without keeping a servant of any kind. What a prodigious innate love of virtue she must have, to marry under such circumstances. It is now Saturday evening, but I wrote the chief of this in the morning. My mother has not been down at all today. The laudanum made her sleep a good deal, and upon the whole I think she is better. My father and I dined by ourselves. How strange! He and John Bond are now very happy together, for I have just heard the heavy step of the latter along the passage. James Digweed called today, and I gave him his brother's deputation. Charles Harwood, too, has just called to ask how we are, in his way from Dummer, whither he has been conveying Miss Garrett, who is going to return to her former residence in Kent. I will leave off, or I shall not have room to add a word tomorrow. Sunday, my mother has had a very good night, and feels much better today. I have received my aunt's letter, and thank you for your scrap. I will write to Charles soon. Pray give Fanny and Edward a kiss from me, and ask George if he has got a new song for me. 'Tis really very kind of my aunt to ask us to Bath again, a kindness that deserves a better return than to profit by it. Yours ever, J.A. Miss Austen. Godmersham Park, Faversham, Kent. Chapter 8. Steventon, December 1. My dear Cassandra, I am so good as to write to you again thus speedily, to let you know that I have just heard from Frank. He was at Cadiz, alive and well, on October 19, and had then very lately received a letter from you, written as long ago as when the London was at St. Helens. But his Raleigh latest intelligence of us was in one from me of September 1, which I sent soon after we got to Godmersham. He had written a packet full for his dearest friends in England, early in October, to go by the Excellent, but the Excellent was not sailed, nor likely to sail, when he dispatched this to me. It comprehended letters for both of us, for Lord Spencer, Mr. Daysh, and the East India directors. Lord St. Vincent had left the fleet when he wrote, and was gone to Gibraltar. It was said to superintend the fitting out of a private expedition from thence against some of the enemy's ports. Minorca or Malta were conjectured to be the objects. Frank writes in good spirits, but says that our correspondence cannot be so easily carried on in future as it has been, as the communication between Cadiz and Lisbon is less frequent than formerly. You and my mother, therefore, must not alarm yourselves at the long intervals that may divide his letters. I address this advice to you too, as being the most tender-hearted of the family. My mother made her entree into the dressing-room, through crowds of admiring spectators yesterday afternoon, and we all drank tea together for the first time these 5 weeks. She has had a tolerable night, and bids fair for a continuance in the same brilliant course of action today. Mr. Lyford was here yesterday. He came while we were at dinner, and partook of our elegant entertainment. I was not ashamed at asking him to sit down to table, for we had some peas soup, a sparerib, and a pudding. He wants my mother to look yellow and to throw out a rash, but she will do neither. I was at Dean yesterday morning. Mary was very well, but does not gain bodily strength very fast. When I saw her so stout on the 3rd and 6th days, I expected to have seen her as well as ever by the end of a fortnight. James went to Ibthorp yesterday to see his mother and child. Letty is with Mary at present, of course exceedingly happy, and in raptures with the child. Mary does not manage matters in such a way as to make me want to lay in myself. She is not tidy enough in her appearance. She has no dressing gown to sit up in, her curtains are all too thin, and things are not in that comfort and style about her which are necessary to make such a situation an enviable one. Elizabeth was really a pretty object with her nice clean cap put on so tidily, and her dress so uniformly white and orderly. We live entirely in the dressing-room now, which I like very much. I always feel so much more elegant in it than in the parlor. No news from Kintbury yet. Eliza sports with our impatience. She was very well last Thursday. Who is Miss Maria Montresor going to marry, and what is to become of Miss Mulcaster? I find great comfort in my stuff gown, but I hope you do not wear yours too often. I have made myself 2 or 3 caps to wear of evenings since I came home, and they save me a world of torment as to hairdressing, which at present gives me no trouble beyond washing and brushing, for my long hair is always plaited up out of sight, and my short hair curls well enough to want no papering. I have had it cut lately by Mr. Butler. There is no reason to suppose that Miss Morgan is dead after all. Mr. Lyford gratified us very much yesterday by his praises of my father's mutton, which they all think the finest that was ever ate. John Bond begins to find himself grow old, which John Bonds ought not to do, and unequal to much hard work. A man is therefore hired to supply his place as to labor, and John himself is to have the care of the sheep. There are not more people engaged than before, I believe, only men instead of boys. I fancy so at least, but you know my stupidity as to such matters. Lizzie Bond is just apprenticed to Miss Small, so we may hope to see her able to spoil gowns in a few years. My father has applied to Mr. May for an alehouse for Robert, at his request, and to Mr. Dean, of Winchester, likewise. This was my mother's idea, who thought he would be proud to oblige a relation of Edward in return for Edward's accepting his money. He sent a very civil answer indeed, but has no house vacant at present. May expects to have an empty one soon at Farnham, so perhaps Nanny may have the honor of drawing ale for the bishop. I shall write to Frank tomorrow. Charles Powlett gave a dance on Thursday, to the great disturbance of all his neighbors, of course, who, take a most lively interest in the state of his finances, and live in hopes of his being soon ruined. We are very much disposed to like our new maid. She knows nothing of a dairy, to be sure, which, in our family, is rather against her, but she is to be taught it all. In short, we have felt the inconvenience of being without a maid so long that we are determined to like her, and she will find it a hard matter to displease us. As yet, she seems to cook very well, is uncommonly stout, and says she can work well at her needle. Sunday, my father is glad to hear so good an account of Edward's pigs, and desires he may be told, as encouragement to his taste for them, that Lord Bolton is particularly curious in his pigs, has had pigsties of a most elegant construction built for them, and visits them every morning as soon as he rises. Affectionately yours, J.A. Miss Austen, Godmersham Park, Faversham. Footnote. Chapter 9. Steventon, Tuesday, December 18. My dear Cassandra, your letter came quite as soon as I expected, and so your letters will always do, because I have made it a rule not to expect them till they come, in which I think I consult the ease of us both. It is a great satisfaction to us to hear that your business is in a way to be settled, and so settled as to give you as little inconvenience as possible. You are very welcome to my father's name, and to his services if they are ever required in it. I shall keep my £10 too, to wrap myself up in next winter. I took the liberty a few days ago of asking your black velvet bonnet to lend me its call, which it very readily did, and by which I have been enabled to give a considerable improvement of dignity to cap, which was before too nidgety to please me. I shall wear it on Thursday, but I hope you will not be offended with me for following your advice as to its ornaments only in part. I still venture to retain the narrow silver round it, put twice round without any bow, and instead of the black military feather shall put in the coquelicot one as being smarter, and besides coquelicot is to be all the fashion this winter. After the ball I shall probably make it entirely black. I am sorry that our dear Charles begins to feel the dignity of ill usage. My father will write to Admiral Gambier. He must have already received so much satisfaction from his acquaintance and patronage of Frank, that he will be delighted, I dare say, to have another of the family introduced to him. I think it would be very right in Charles to address Sir Thomas on the occasion, though I cannot approve of your scheme of writing to him, which you communicated to me a few nights ago, to request him to come home and convey you to Steventon. To do you justice, however, you had some doubts of the propriety of such a measure yourself. I am very much obliged to my dear little George for his message, for his love at least. His duty, I suppose, was only in consequence of some hint of my favorable intentions towards him from his father or mother. I am sincerely rejoiced, however, that I ever was born, since it has been the means of procuring him a dish of tea. Give my best love to him. Wednesday, I have changed my mind, and changed the trimmings of my cap this morning. They are now such as you suggested. I felt as if I should not prosper if I strayed from your directions, and I think it makes me look more like Lady Conyngham now than it did before, which is all that one lives for now. I believe I shall make my new gown like my robe, but the back of the latter is all in a piece with the tail, and will 7 yards enable me to copy it in that respect. I have just heard from Martha and Frank. His letter was written on November 12. All well and nothing particular. J.A. Miss Austen, Godmersham Park, Faversham. 10. Steventon, Monday night, December 24. My dear Cassandra, I have got some pleasant news for you which I am eager to communicate, and therefore begin my letter sooner, though I shall not send it sooner than usual. Admiral Gambier, in reply to my father's application, writes as follows. As it is usual to keep young officers in small vessels, it being most proper on account of their inexperience, and it being also a situation where they are more in the way of learning their duty, your son has been continued in the Scorpion. But I have mentioned to the Board of Admiralty his wish to be in a frigate, and when a proper opportunity offers, and it is judged that he has taken his turn in a small ship, I hope he will be removed. With regard to your son now in the London, I am glad I can give you the assurance that his promotion is likely to take place very soon, as Lord Spencer has been so good as to say he would include him in an arrangement that he proposes making in a short time relative to some promotions in that quarter. There, I may now finish my letter and go and hang myself, for I am sure I can neither write nor do anything which will not appear insipid to you after this. Now I really think he will soon be made, and only wish we could communicate our foreknowledge of the event to him whom it principally concerns. My father has written to Daysh to desire that he will inform us, if he can, when the commission is sent. Your chief wish is now ready to be accomplished. And could Lord Spencer give happiness to Martha at the same time, what a joyful heart he would make of yours. I have sent the same extract of the sweets of Gambier to Charles, who, poor fellow, though he sinks into nothing but an humble attendant on the hero of the piece, will, I hope, be contented with the prospect held out to him. By what the Admiral says, it appears as if he had been designedly kept in the Scorpion. But I will not torment myself with conjectures and suppositions. Facts shall satisfy me. Frank had not heard from any of us for 10 weeks when he wrote to me on November 12, in consequence of Lord St. Vincent being removed to Gibraltar. When his commission is sent, however, it will not be so long on its road as our letters, because all the government dispatches are forwarded by land to his lordship from Lisbon with great regularity. I returned from Manadown this morning, and found my mother certainly in no respect worse than when I left her. She does not like the cold weather, but that we cannot help. I spent my time very quietly and very pleasantly with Catherine. Miss Blackford is agreeable enough. I do not want people to be very agreeable, as it saves me the trouble of liking them a great deal. I found only Catherine and her when I got to Manadown on Thursday. We dined together, and went together to Worthing to seek the protection of Mrs. Clark, with whom were Lady Mildmay, her eldest son, and Mr. and Mrs. Hoare. Our ball was very thin, but by no means unpleasant. There were 31 people, and only 11 ladies out of the number, and but 5 single women in the room. Of the gentlemen present you may have some idea from the list of my partners. Mr. Wood, G. Leffer, Rice, a Mr. Butcher, belonging to the Temples, a sailor and not of the 11th Light Dragoons. Mr. Temple, not the horrid one of all, Mr. W.M. Ord, cousin to the Kingsclere man, Mr. John Harwood, and Mr. Calland, who appeared as usual with his hat in his hand, and stood every now and then behind Catherine and me to be talked to and abused for not dancing. We teased him, however, into it at last. I was very glad to see him again after so long a separation, and he was altogether rather the genius and flirt of the evening. He inquired after you. There were 20 dances, and I danced them all, and without any fatigue. I was glad to find myself capable of dancing so much, and with so much satisfaction as I did. From my slender enjoyment of the Ashford balls, as assemblies for dancing, I had not thought myself equal to it, but in cold weather, and with few couples I fancy, I could just as well dance for a week together as for half an hour. My black cap was openly admired by Mrs. Leffrey, and secretly I imagine by everybody else in the room. Poor Edward, it is very hard that he, who has everything else in the world that he can wish for, should not have good health too. But I hope with the assistance of stomach complaints, faintnesses, and sicknesses, he will soon be restored to that blessing likewise. If his nervous complaint proceeded from a suppression of something that ought to be thrown out, which does not seem unlikely, the first of these disorders may really be a remedy, and I sincerely wish it may, for I know no one more deserving of happiness without alloy than Edward is. The Lords of the Admiralty will have enough of our applications at present, for I hear from Charles that he has written to Lord Spencer himself to be removed. I am afraid His Serene Highness will be in a passion, and order some of our heads to be cut off. You deserve a longer letter than this, but it is my unhappy fate seldom to treat people so well as they deserve. God bless you. Yours affectionately, Jane Austen. Wednesday. The snow came to nothing yesterday, so I did go to Dean, and returned home at 9 o'clock at night in the little carriage, and without being very cold. Miss Austen. Godmersham Park, Faversham, Kent. Chapter 11. Steventon, Friday, December 28. My dear Cassandra, Frank is made. He was yesterday raised to the rank of commander, and appointed to the Petterel sloop, now at Gibraltar. A letter from Daysh has just announced this, and as it is confirmed by a very friendly one from Mr. Matthew to the same effect, transcribing one from Admiral Gambier to the General, we have no reason to suspect the truth of it. As soon as you have cried a little for joy, you may go on, and learn further that the India House have taken Captain Austen's petition into consideration. This comes from Daesh. And likewise that Lieutenant Charles John Austen is removed to the Tamar frigate. This comes from the Admiral. We cannot find out where the Tamar is, but I hope we shall now see Charles here at all events. This letter is to be dedicated entirely to good news. If you will send my father an account of your washing and letter expenses, etc., he will send you a draft for the amount of it, as well as for your next quarter, and for Edward's rent. If you don't buy a muslin gown now on the strength of this money and Frank's promotion, I shall never forgive you. Mrs. Lefroy has just sent me word that Lady Dorchester meant to invite me to her ball on January 8th, which, though an humble blessing compared with what the last page records, I do not consider as any calamity. I cannot write any more now, but I have written enough to make you very happy, and therefore may safely conclude. Yours affectionately, Jane. Miss Austen, Godmersham Park. Chapter 12. Steventon, Tuesday, January 8, 1799. My dear Cassandra, you must read your letters over 5 times in future before you send them, and then, perhaps, you may find them as entertaining as I do. I laughed at several parts of the one which I am now answering. Charles is not come yet, but he must come this morning, or he shall never know what I will do to him. The ball at Kempshott is this evening, and I have got him an invitation, though I have not been so considerate as to get him a partner. But the cases are different between him and Eliza Bailey, for he is not in a dying way, and may therefore be equal to getting a partner for himself. I believe I told you that Monday was to be the ball night, for which, and for all other errors into which I may ever have led you, I humbly ask your pardon. Elizabeth is very cruel about my writing music, and, as a punishment for her, I should insist upon always writing out all hers for her in future, if I were not punishing myself at the same time. I am tolerably glad to hear that Edward's income is so good a one, as glad as I can be at anybody's being rich except you and me, and I am thoroughly rejoiced to hear of his present to you. I am not to wear my white satin cap tonight after all. I am to wear a mamelone cap instead, which Charles Fowle sent to Mary, and which she lends me. It is all the fashion now, worn at the opera, and by Lady Mildmays at Hackwood balls. I hate describing such things, and I dare say you will be able to guess what it is like. I have got over the dreadful epocha of mantua making much better than I expected. My gown is made very much like my blue one, which you always told me sat very well, with only these variations. The sleeves are short, the wrap fuller, the apron comes over it, and a band of the same completes the whole. I assure you that I dread the idea of going to Brighton as much as you do, but I am not without hopes that something may happen to prevent it. F has lost his election at B, and perhaps they may not be able to see company for some time. They talk of going to Bath, too, in the spring, and perhaps they may be overturned in their way down, and all laid up for the summer. Wednesday, I have had a cold and weakness in one of my eyes for some days, which makes writing neither very pleasant nor very profitable, and which will probably prevent my finishing this letter myself. My mother has undertaken to do it for me, and I shall leave the Kempshott ball for her. You express so little anxiety about my being murdered under Ash Park copse by Mrs. Hulbert's servant, that I have a great mind not to tell you whether I was or not, and shall only say that I did not return home that night or the next, as Martha kindly made room for me in her bed, which was the shut-up one in the new nursery. Nurse and the child slept upon the floor, and there we all were in some confusion and great comfort. The bed did exceedingly well for us, both to lie awake in and talk till 2 o'clock, and to sleep in the rest of the night. I love Martha better than ever, and I mean to go and see her if I can, when she gets home. We all dined at the Harwoods on Thursday, and the party broke up the next morning. This complaint in my eye has been a sad bore to me, for I have not been able to read or work in any comfort since Friday. But one advantage will be derived from it, for I shall be such a proficient in music by the time I have got rid of my cold, that I shall be perfectly qualified in that science at least to take Mr. Roop's office at Eastwell next summer, and I am sure of Elizabeth's recommendation, be it only on Harriet's account. Of my talent in drawing I have given specimens in my letters to you, and I have nothing to do but to invent a few hard names for the stars.